Ahoy there, mateys. This is part three of Mark Smith, the John Tetzel of Circleville. Part two, I kind of went over the again, re-emphasized the idea of the corporate takeover, what it felt like when him and his guys showed up, and my interactions with him through the student government, and believing that everything was okay, and how those kinds of events unfolded into me being the assistant pastor under Don Seymour at the campus church. I need to talk about the campus church environment before this happened because it was small. I will grant you, it was a small community of believers in that church, but it was thriving. We had, I remember a couple named Jamie and Tony that used to go there. He was a short guy with brown hair, and she was a little bit bigger than him with red hair. I can't remember their last name. They were wonderful people. And several students that went there. There was another lady there that drove the van, and we had a ministerial youth group, at least a children's ministry youth group from kids that lived nearby the campus church. We'd go pick them up. And we had remodeled the youth room. In fact, one of the most awesome remodeling jobs I ever did, paint and wallpaper, and it was beautiful. That room was nice. These kids walked in like, wow, we're doing this for 10 kids. Worship was awesome. You get the occasional. Don Seymour he did a Sunday morning and a Sunday evening. Dr. Latimer and Merla would also be in attendance from time to time, one or both of them. It was just a good environment, and we loved each other. We were close. We prayed for each other. There was another lady, I believe she was the matriarch of the family. Happany, I think, was her last name, Margie. At any rate, then there were several people that I knew through college fellow students who she was a relation to, who also would pop in at the church from time to time. It was just it was a great environment. It was a good church environment for a long time, and it wasn't dead in any sense of the imagination. And we were kind of putting things together too. Me and Pastor Don and a couple other people at the church. We'd played a sweet New Year's Eve event there, a concert. We had 3 live bands come, and a pretty good number of kids showed up for that. The point is, it wasn't dead. It was growing, and we were moving there. It was a good community of believers, and ministry was taking place. The whole thing begins with Smith approaching Pastor Don and us on the board, the leadership of the church, about wanting to do an add-on to the church, and wanted us to, the expectation is that we would match the amount the college was going to put up, and submitted a plan to us, as I remember. I'm shady on whether or not they submitted a plan or if it was, we could talk about that, but I'm pretty sure it was a floor plan already submitted. It was going to be on the back end of the campus building. And it was some astronomical amount of money that the laws and rules of Constitution bylaws of the Churches of Christ Christian Union dictate that you can only take on so much money per member of a church in loans if you're going to do something at a church. And the amount that they were asking us to match up against the number of people we had there and the debt to person ratio, there was absolutely no way that was going to happen. Now, did he put that to us as a courtesy, or did he pretty much know what was going to, judging how all this played out, what was going to happen? We talked about it in a board meeting and obviously voted it down. We don't want to do this. And even if we wanted to, the rules and bylaws of the Constitution wouldn't allow us to do so. So we voted it down. And again, it seemed like things were okay. The democratic process worked. Seemingly out of the blue, Don Seymour, Pastor Don, a position came open and he took a position in Avon Park, Florida. And I've thought about this years later now, and I'll tell you that it doesn't matter to me if Pastor Don knew what was coming. If he didn't, then I'm sure he was surprised afterwards to find out what had happened to people that he cared a whole lot about. If he did know in advance, then good on him that he got an escape route and got out of there before things got ugly. Pastor Don seemed like to me a man of good character and an intelligent man, and someone who knew warfare firsthand going on around the gravity of his ministries. So he didn't seem to me like a man that would duck out. So he likely took a wonderful position somewhere and didn't know what Smith was coming to do. They lured us in, the denomination in hand with Mark Smith, lured us into a board meeting. It was a couple weeks after we did a big send-off dinner and everything to Pastor Don, sent him to Avon Park. And it was a week or two after that, the meeting was scheduled, the board meeting was scheduled under the disguise of, we're going to sit down with you guys and figure out what's important to you for your next pastor. Denomination guys, when Mark Smith came in to do this, that Dan Jordan, he's going to get his chapter of all this, and Joe Duvall both had a part of this. They walked in with him. I don't remember, when I think about the situation, if Hermes was there or not, Tom Hermes was there or not, but for a fact, Dan Jordan was sitting to one side and Joe Duvall was sitting to the other side. So the denomination signed off on this. Right up until it was even after a service, and right up until the minute we walked into that board meeting, we all walked into that board meeting believing that we were going in to sit down to talk to the 3CU dignitaries about the qualities that were important to us concerning a new pastor. We'd even talked about it a couple of times ourselves going into the meeting. So it was weird when it came time for the meeting and we're all walking downstairs that Mark Smith walked in too, because you're not a member of the denomination. You're not a member of the board. So what do you have to do with this? Other than it made sense that it was the college. He was there to represent the college and the fact that we weren't going to expand. And what they did was informed us as a board in that meeting that we were no longer a church on the Churches of Christ or Christian Union's roster. We were no longer a church in the denomination. Our board is disbanded. He told us, you as a board are disbanded. And this was effective immediately. You're closed. Your board no longer exists. Your church is not a church in the denomination. Mark Smith, and sadly, there's nobody that I can tag who was in that meeting who could or would confirm, but Smith looked right at me, leaned forward, looked right at me in this meeting and said, we're putting a new pastor in this church, Dennis, and it's not going to be you. Both those lackeys sitting right to either side of him, number one and number two, nodding like, yeah, it's true. That was a hostile takeover, and the campus church was stolen by Mark Smith and his goons. Their stories are coming later. Well, not the first mess I wound up having to clean up for Dan Jordan. So that was it. We left. They locked the doors. They changed the locks on the next day. The locks were changed. A family that was there that had contributed, like there's TVs they had bought, stuff they had bought, tax records, which probably should have stayed there in retrospect, but they showed up in a Jeep and a pickup truck with the church and tried to grab a bunch of their belongings to take, because this was a hostile takeover. This was a corporate hostile takeover of this church. There's no other way to describe it. And they showed up and grabbed some of their things to try to get out of there before the locks were changed. And somebody got wind of it. Somebody called Smith. Smith literally called the cops and showed up at this grandmama's house with the cops and stood there and made them bring everything out that they took out of the church for him to seize control back of. And then they put Aaron Duvall in. Joe Duvall's son is the pastor of that church. Now, I will say, I never got the opportunity to sit down with Joe Duvall's son, Aaron Duvall, and in whatever beef I may or have with Joe Duvall. I can't say anything negative about Aaron Duvall. He is an intelligent young man and a diligent young man from what I've seen, and loves the Lord, and I can't say anything negative about him. And it's another one of those paradoxes that out of all this garbage, some good can pop up. He was a good pastor, and he was young, and the kids liked him. And I mean, if you're going to stand somebody up in front of me, I guess. Good work. This isn't the first time. And things were ongoing. Ultimately, they never wound up using the old sanctuary. They tore the old gym down, put a big giant multi-purpose building back there, and we're putting at least from what I understand, most of the chapel services moved back there. It's still sitting there today, untouched the way it was before. I don't even know if they use the building. Probably full of cobwebs and storage. If they don't do an occasional chapel there, something else is going on in the multi-purpose building. It's a backup chapel maybe, and it's sad. But it's indicative of the kind of disrespect and just indifference that the man had for the rich heritage of this place when he came and basically destroyed it. I could do sitting here thinking about it, looking at the notes that I have and the time that I have on here. I was going to do a part 4 concerning where is he now, but I think I can just close it up and finish this up in 3 parts. In that, I will. I have an article from the Circleville Herald. They're kind of touchy on. You can only look at it once, and then you got to pay for a subscription. But I will go ahead and put the link to the article for the Circleville Herald. He left under controversy. His son got old enough while he was there to start to work there, and it was a disaster. He worked or was in the library and did a thing it's in the paper, slut test. Literally put his finger in the girl's mouth, maybe more than one. I'm not sure. You can read the article yourself. I can't recall now thinking about it. And if they closed their lips around his finger, they were a slut. He just walked around sticking his finger in girls' mouths. They were investigating that. He got super angry and tried to imply that he and his son were the victims in all this, and he was being unjustly accused, but strangely resigned from his position. There's another newspaper article. I wore out my free stuff on the Circleville Herald, but you can get on their website and do a search on Mark Smith slut test. 2 articles pop up. The first article that they wrote about the situation, I will put the link here. The second article, I believe, was from 2017, that he's the president. Somehow him and his son have got another position at another college, and he's the president there. And I just got to wonder, did he change his ways, or is there more controversy that followed him there in his illegal theft of churches and his crappy business practices? Yeah, I'm done talking about this now. I'm going to zip this up. This was part 3 of Mark Smith, the John Tetzel of Circleville. I'm going to do subsequent parts concerning cleaning up after the mess maker, Dan Jordan, and that Mr. Slick, Joe Duvall, and the Don, the Don, the Mr. T Starter Kit himself. Formerly General Superintendent Tom Hermes, who snuck out. Yep, that's all I have for now. God bless you. Look, if I encourage you to visit ttwmtruth.com. There's blogs and videos and other crap on there. I've been saying it's a tiny rabbit hole you can nestle into for about an hour and then jump back out if you're so inclined. These are helping me. Listen, if you've been hurt by the church and nobody else will say, wow, that's messed up and you were done wrong, I got you for that. Nobody said, I love you. I love you. See you next one.